This is Craic politics.
Yay!
And this is what we're talking about. Blah, 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 blah. Okay, now let's hand over professionals. Dr. Louis Bromfield and Professor Matthew Wolf for Stinky One, aka my dad.
Hello and welcome to the Horse Race Politics podcast. I am one of your hosts, Dr. Louis Bromfield, postdoctoral researcher in politics at Swansea University. And Conservative is the name of the game today, and my co-host is known for being extremely fiscally conservative. Just ask him to pick up the bill. It's Professor Matthew Wall. How's it going?
It's all on expenses, but I can't have drinks on the receipt. That's what I've been told by my office.
Okay.
So I'm sorry. This is your round.
That's my round. That's okay. Today we have the wonderful pleasure of being joined by Tom Giffard, member of the Senedd, very prestigious title. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. As was until dissolution.
Yeah, until
a couple of weeks ago.
literally 10 days ago. I've
Yeah.
lost all track of time. Yeah.
Yes. How does it feel to be unemployed?
Well, I'm still getting paid. That's
Yeah.
that's the main thing. No, it's really weird, and it's kind of like, I got elected for the first time 5 years ago, and it's just like, oh my god, it's here.
Yeah.
That's the big thing at the moment. It's
Yeah.
like everything you kind of feel like you're working towards for 5 years. Like this is it. Being in
Yeah.
the studio, this is it.
This is
culmination
the
of 5 years.
culmination,
Yeah,
really. And you're the last in the last group of Senedd members to get a 5-year term, right? We're now moving into 4-year terms. So you.
Well, who knows what we're going to do next? But,
Yeah, literally.
For now, you're the last.
Literally don't know.
But so Matt, do you want to get started with the usual kind of?
Well, you
segue
mentioned that we do seem to exist in the present, but that is conditioned by our past, right?
Wow.
And
Philosophical.
yeah, well, I like to
This
drop
is
some,
good. Yeah,
some
yeah,
philosophy.
I can tell you.
I'm just composing a poem as I talk. But obviously, so you're actually the lead candidate on the Conservative list for Goir Abertawe, which is where this very studio is, which is where Swansea University is. So could you tell us how you get to be the lead candidate and a recently dissolved member of the Senedd? Like, how does a normal person, more or less, attain this? Like, what's the journey?
I'd love to tell you there's like a great grand plan, but I genuinely don't sort of know how I ended up doing this. So I came to Swansea University. You were one of my lecturers when I was here in uni.
I'm terribly sorry. I think it was like my first year on the job.
It was. Yeah.
I was like, could you guys read some books, maybe?
Yeah. So that I like to think that helped.
Thank you.
And it was. I had done a bit of teaching. I was teaching assistant before I came to uni, so I had a gap year. Did that, and my intention was to study history and politics, go back to teaching afterwards and be a kind of secondary history teacher. That was the plan. And then when I was here, I got kind of involved in the Conservative Society, got to know a load of people, got involved in the party locally and all that kind of stuff. Coming out of uni then, I kind of got offered a job working for a Senedd member at the time. And I sort of thought, well, I really want to do teaching, but it'd be stupid if I turned down work.
You might end up being a better teacher.
Yeah,
if
maybe.
you've actually worked in.
Yeah. And it was just one of those things. Like a load of my friends who were graduating at the time sort of didn't have jobs or were moving back to live with parents and stuff. And I thought I'd be stupid to turn down work. And I just kind of got sucked in really to politics and became a councillor and then a Senedd member in 2021, albeit on completely different boundaries to what we're fighting in this election.
So was it on the regional?
Yeah, on the regional list for South Wales West. Yeah.
South Wales West as it was. Yeah, that's something. I don't think that applies anymore in any form of election, right? Because it used to be like European Parliament elections and Senedd elections used the same regional tier, as I recall. Like, it's always so complicated, the Welsh electoral system.
And, like, nobody understands it. So, like, I'd be South Wales West, and I'd represent Swansea to Bridgend, and then people in Carmarthenshire and Pembrokeshire who think they lived in South West Wales, which is very different. I was their Senedd member. But there is a difference between South Wales West and South West Wales.
There's no longer a difference.
There isn't.
We're now in Goir Abertawe. Yeah. Long may it continue to last. I understand there was somebody was crowned the king of Goir Abertawe on, like, a hill.
Really?
Yeah, this new. No, I'm just joking.
I was gonna say,
yeah, no.
Is this the is this the way the declaration is done after the count?
Yeah, it's like the Wicker Man. Ending. Yeah, is basically how we announce our new members of the Senedd. No, but it is a point actually. I think about the system here. Is that like there have been a huge number of different geographies to grasp with, right? And that's because there's different territorial levels, but also because the way that we elect the Senedd has changed as well. So like that's all kind of at play, as you say. Like you're making plans of like, where do I get my campaign materials?
Yeah.
Who, where are my supporters? Where are my persuadables? Like, how do I deploy my team? But we're in a totally new map.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we only really knew the final map, I think it was about 18 months ago.
Mm-hmm.
So if you think in a 5-year term, you're trying to use your thing to best effect. You represent everybody in the region you represent, of course. But if you're looking at the next election prospect, you want to hyper target, if you like, in
And you have to have an
that
office. I
patch.
think is your office go Shinan?
Yeah. I've got an office in Gysainen. But it's obviously very difficult when you don't sort of know what the geography is going to be for that, which makes it really impossible. And the complicated bit again is we're fighting. So take this seat, for example. It's nearly the whole City of Swansea minus 4 wards because of they've paired 2 random Westminster constituencies together. But after the election, even if the voting system doesn't change, and that's a whole different discussion, the plan is to reassess the geography again. So these boundaries on this election will not last. So if, hypothetically, touch wood, I can get 3 terms, I could have 3 Senedd terms on 3 different boundaries.
And obviously in politics, like a lot of it is building up a local credibility, and like we call like the patch that a politician has. But if literally the system keeps shifting your patch around, it's sort of not arbitrarily is the wrong word, because I think the Democracy and Boundary Commission tried to have a not politicized system. But the kind of alternative to politicization seems to be like randomness.
Yeah.
And that's difficult to manage like professionally, right?
Yeah, and you see, to be fair, I think the Boundary Commission had a really difficult job, particularly when they were tasked with pairing 2 already existing Westminster constituencies together. But you've got like weird situations where, for example, in this patch, you've got the Clydach ward, which part of is in one parliamentary constituency and another part is in a different parliamentary constituency. But they have the same councillors. So it's just like, it just doesn't make any logical sense to regular Joes on the
just how
street
people
at all.
actually live their life. I live in like one Arlyth, Clydach. Like, I don't live in 2 wards in one Arlyth. Right? You know what I mean? It's hard to it's hard to engage with the system that does that to you. Actually. Yeah.
Have you seen that playing out on the campaign train at all? Like people kind of just maybe confused as to who you are, or like they're not sure of like
I
who
think,
I'm voting for.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is they don't understand the system, right? I think we're all very Westminster brained, aren't we? And it's kind of first past the post thing. So
and in the States it's the same. So they're like the 2 big narratives are always first past the post.
Yeah. So the most, as people are aware, generally there are more politicians, and obviously there's a lot of dislike, I would say, for that. But I think that there is a lack of understanding probably around the way the system works, how you use your vote to best effect. And like I say, not explaining to people, it's not first past the post system. People don't have to vote tactically. Nobody's going to get a majority of the other side of the election. So kind of vote for who you want to vote for, and you'll probably get a representative of that party fighting your corner in a hung parliament the other side. And that is the best impact and the way I think people can use their vote in this election. But it just remains to be seen whether it will still be seen as a first past the post system.
Yeah. What's your take on the kind of closed list nature of the election? The fact that the party is the kingmaker in terms of what the order of candidates are, and voters don't really get a say. They just vote for party, and then whoever, like if you disappear, there's just someone there to take your place immediately, and they go to decide. If you disappear, let's trust that.
Yeah, no, I just
I'm gonna go Khashoggi on this podcast right now. Yeah,
I dread like being in hospital for something and people palming the wrist, ringing me to check if I'm okay. In reality, you know why they're really called it.
Well, we've had that with a big fallout of Reform candidates over the last couple of weeks. They found out they're 3rd on the list in Wrexham, and then they're nope, I'm not happy with this. And
I think that's probably a good indicator of why I don't think this closed list thing necessarily works, because you've got, it depends, different parties will do it differently, right? But if you use the Reform example, where they kind of centralised it and they said, this is who's going to be the candidates. I don't think the members had a say at all. I
mean, their leader had a job interview with Nigel Farage. That's true, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not trying to be partisan here, but like that was on the Welsh TV.
Yeah.
It's like, oh yeah, Jeremy Kyle gave me like a sort of a mock interview and I came through it well. Yeah. You're like, this is a mad way of selecting who's in charge of Wales.
Yeah. And so, it puts a lot of power in the hands of a central party, probably. And what you see then is a lot of fallout. I think like if there's a more democratic process in the way that you elect candidates, probably those that are unhappy about being 5th on a list somewhere,
they've had a vote.
Exactly.
Or they've had some kind of run at it.
Yeah, exactly. So there's less opportunity to be butthurt about it. Yeah. That's probably the best word.
There's a famous, like, these 2 Irish political scientists who did, like, candidate selection in Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael. You can imagine what it was like pure cutthroat.
Yeah.
But like they said, like candidate selection is the secret garden of politics. Like that's where like nearly, and that's in an Irish system where you can still select between candidates from the same party, but like there's so much of politics is just being selected.
Yeah.
It's just I think it's fair play to let the voters have some influence on that as well.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. So we obviously amended the legislation on this to push for open lists. The candidate selection stuff's weird though. So when I got selected in 2021, I defeated an incumbent Senedd member to become top of the list. I didn't necessarily do that by design, but it was just
And was it like a hustings and a kind of.
so it was in the middle of COVID, so it was really awkward.
Jeez, I forgot that.
Yeah, didn't we all? So it was like a really awkward system, but like because the geography meant that it was like Swansea to Bridgend in South Wales West, and you had candidates who were like quite well known in Swansea, you had candidates who were quite well known in Bridgend, and I'd been a councillor in Bridgend and previously here in Swansea. I was kind of the only one that had been
It's kind of spanned
both.
Yeah.
So that really helped me, but it was kind of, I stuck my name in hoping, maybe I can sneak number 2 and I might get in, but I wasn't really anticipating a lot, and then became sort of number 1 on the list. So it's a really awkward conversation then with the incumbent MS afterwards, being like, "Hey, I'm really sorry I took your job."
How's it feel to be unemployed?
Yeah.
It's not easy politics in that regard, right?
Yeah.
There's only so much cake to cut up. Yeah.
Obviously, this is like a very difficult electoral context for the Conservatives. But what is the pitch to voters on the doorstep that you're giving?
So the kind of broad pitch we're making is, like I said, it's not a proportional system. So people, if they want to vote Conservative, they will get Conservative Senedd members.
It is a proportional system.
Sorry, it's not a first past the post system. It is a proportional system.
You got the message.
I'm messing this up already.
Thanks for watching this episode of the Horse Race Politics podcast.
So it's not proportional.
It is.
You have to go with the biggest party.
Yeah. So one
Don't
party
waste
state.
your vote.
It is a proportional system. So people can vote for who they want to vote for. I think, when you look at the sort of lie of the land, I guess, in Wales, right, there's a genuine sense and a need for change in Wales after 27 years of a Labour government. And the kind of record there speaks for itself. Longest NHS waits, worst educational outcomes, weakest economy, right? I think a lot of people turn to Plaid or the Lib Dems to look for that change. Without necessarily realising they've been part of that government in different ways over the last 27 years. So I think it's quite difficult for them to say we're going to change anything if they have been part of co-constructing it together. So it makes it really difficult for them. Reform, as we've seen, more interested, I think, in fighting with each other than actually fighting on behalf of people in Wales. So we're the only party, I think, as Welsh Conservatives that can stand in this election and say, we can offer the change that Wales needs. We've never run the Welsh government. But importantly, we've got a plan and we know what we want to do. We're not sort of making things up off the top of our heads.
We've got an experienced team who've actually been on committees, contributed to legislation.
Yeah, and you look at look at the breadth of incumbent Senedd members. We've got, running councils and various stuff, actual real world experience doing that stuff. And I do think that matters. And it also matters to know how government works as well. So, it's one of the problems I think with reform is, there's a lot of candidates who will be very, very new to politics. A year ago, they had no Senedd members at all.
Yeah.
And the idea that they can come in and not only be in the Senedd, but run the Welsh government, I think is really difficult to see how you can impactfully make a difference by doing that.
So how do you pitch specifically to those kind of almost generational Labour voters? I mean, like, I've been alive for basically the same amount of time that Labour's been in power in Wales. So I've never known like a Wales that's not been run by Labour. And that's not to say I'm a generational Labour supporter or anything, but it feels a lot easier to convince reform voters that you're a more credible alternative than it is to reach across to Welsh Labour. So how do you differ your message to try and reach these people?
Well, I think what's really interesting is the sort of doors I've been knocking. You don't need to convince people not to vote Labour in this election.
Sure.
I think that argument is sort of
That's true.
one.
Yeah.
Where to go with their vote.
It's where they go next is the bit
Sure.
I'm not confident about. I think, like I say, explaining to people about Plaid and the Lib Dems in particular, and their sort of role in co-constructing stuff, I think has, I found works quite well. And you're not looking at, I would love nothing more, right, than to get 100% of the vote, right, and everybody to be super enthusiastic about voting Conservative. I get it, right? Not everybody's going to be. But I think, you can make a rational argument to people about, okay, well, you and I both agree that we need a change. And what does that change look like? Does it look, you accept that Plaid and the Lib Dems can't offer it. So does it look like that kind of chaotic reform, top of the head, 6 candidates resigning in a week stuff? Or does it look like a Conservative Party with a plan to fix the NHS and improve the education system and so on? And so that's the broader pitch. It's like, what does change look like? Does it look like this chaotic week-to-week change? Or does it look like a plan and a bit of stability and experience?
So there's so much that you've said there that is so interesting.
Yeah.
One thing to say, maybe just to layer into political science. So like what you're describing there in terms of like Plaid, the Lib Dems and Labour, we might easily push the Greens into this kind of space as well. Like, so in analysis of Welsh party politics, that's often called like the progressive consensus position. So I think it was outlined by Mark Craic for, there's kind of points of commonality on, let's call it the broad left in Wales. And Louis and I have talked quite a lot about like thinking about blocks of support for parties, just to kind of get a sense of exactly what you've just asked, like how many people are actually shifting across blocks. And from Cardiff University, a lot of stuff is within block. Does that make sense? Yeah. And it does seem to me that like the kind of change argument that you're making does have some resonance to the extent that people feel like the progressive consensus is what's failed.
Yeah.
I guess people might kind of come back though and say, well, it's hard to do that kind of policy, and this is what you must hear on the doorsteps when you've had a Conservative government with austerity. And I mean, I think the Conservatives had significant achievements across their time in government, but the kind of last days were difficult, just generally nationally. So like, how do you kind of solve that conundrum? Is it difficult when, I suppose most people in this area probably read more about the UK than about Wales? Or tend to?
Yeah, I agree with that. Let me just come on to the point about blocks first. I think what I found really interesting is that like people like us who follow politics sort of intensely do not see politics in the same way that regular people do. So for example, like, I spoke to like somebody who's undecided between Reform and the Greens, and you're like, well, that's a really interesting, but in a sense it makes a lot of sense, right? Because they're both kind of
they're the most radical change type parties.
Yeah. And you've kind of seen recently, right, the rise in the Green vote on a UK-wide basis has coincided with the decline in the Reform vote. Which is actually genuinely really interesting.
I haven't actually checked those vote flows.
Yeah,
those flow maps you can see.
So I don't know if it's direct or indirect or whatever, but certainly, the two are happening at the same time. So I think that there's something there. I agree with you though around that kind of record of a UK government. Like I say, lots to be proud of. Particularly for me, someone who cares about education, around education. Best educational outcomes in lots of ways, and the best readers I think it was in the Western world because of reforms we did there. But I also agree that a lot of voters sort of feel let down, particularly on immigration, probably more than anything else. A lot of naturally conservative voters feeling quite let down.
The Boris wave, something we've been. It's just come up again and again as like, you promised less than less than 100,000 as a target.
Promise,
It surged,
Yeah, and I think what that shows, if I could be blunt about it, is the problems with making promises without plans to deliver them. And I'm not sure that there was ever, when David Cameron makes that promise about getting to under 100,000, whether there's ever really a credible plan about how you deliver that. It's always this kind of consensus of, we'll probably deliver less than Labour and therefore we'll be fine.
One approach seemed to just be make the Home Office like be nasty to people who are here, right? I mean, that did seem to be a kind of an element of the strat, but like I always think they struggle to unpick that from like the economic consequences. Ultimately, like when you went to the Office for Budget Responsibility and you're like, we're going to cut immigration, they'd say, well, you're going to cut your growth forecast.
Yeah.
That was just a recurring tension.
Yeah, and it, again, without getting too in the weeds, I think there's a little bit around growth versus GDP per capita, which is a slightly different thing again. So, lots of immigration coming into this country was good for growth in general. Was it necessarily good for people's living standards? I think that's a different argument that we can have as well. But, Conservative voters definitely, and I understand why, completely feel, quite let down by some of those things. And I get that. I think this sort of coming back to your question about this election. Yeah. I think this election, those things are not on the ballot paper.
No.
And actually, I've been relatively refreshed because we talk a lot about the things that people do and don't understand on the doorstep. I think people do understand something like immigration is not on the doorstep. It's not coming up as much
Yeah, I
as I
should
would
say,
have
so we've
thought.
been running the election study,
Yeah.
right? And we've just been starting to get the data through, and we're kind of doing these like really exploratory early analysis. And we ask people, what's the most important issue in the UK, Wales, and your
Yeah.
local area? UK has tended to be immigration.
Yeah.
Wales has tended to be NHS.
Yeah.
And your local areas tended to be infrastructure. Now, that's not a firm finding or
Yeah,
anything,
yeah.
but
It does
I was
match up.
really heartened by
Yeah.
that, because I'm like, people can distinguish.
So I've noticed two big things in the time I've been a Senedd member that sort of aided people's understanding of the Senedd, the way the Senedd works and operates. First is COVID, where you saw completely different restrictions happening in Wales to in England, and people can say, hang on a second, why have we got different rules here relative to elsewhere? The second one was 20 miles an hour.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I used to banter with the lads who were
Yeah.
working for maybe it was working for yourself or working with the Conservative members generally. I'd be like, you must be loving this 20 miles an hour. You know what I mean? This is just
Yeah.
like gravy, right?
Yeah. But I think it helps sometimes in terms aid people's understanding of devolution to have these points of difference where people notice these big seismic things.
Physical
and they go, oh, hang
differences,
on, why are we different? Yeah. So yeah, they're the two big things, and I think people's understanding, certainly in the 5 years I've been in Senedd, have improved drastically in terms of people's understanding and the way it works. I think having an election now that the result isn't known and helps. You said earlier about having a kind of UK-wide media landscape. I think the UK-wide media landscape interest in this election is probably greater than any other Senedd election because the result is uncertain. You've got potentially Labour not being in government here. So all this stuff
It feeds into these UK narratives generally, right? Can make Plaid hard to cover. And when you talk to journalists from the UK, you kind of have to explain what Plaid is. and the kind of this kind of Welsh layer is difficult for people. But I like coming from the outside, just trying to figure it out. But that's one of the things we'll be testing in the election study is whether there's been a kind of a growth in interest and knowledge. But there is this whole extra learning layer now about the electoral system. But I heard a guy on the radio today, an Alfella, and he was like, I understand we have 16 constituencies and each one will be electing 6 seats on the Dahont system. And I was like, this was, it's a vox pop, so it's not a representative sample. And I know people are saying, well, a lot of people don't understand, and the system is hard to understand.
Yeah.
But my sense is aligned with yours that people are increasingly realizing and have just been brought to realize how important this is for them.
So I had a really interesting, because I was doing a television show for the BBC a couple of weeks ago, and I was chatting in the green room to the other parties, and I said, how are you approaching this on the doorstep, right? When people ask about the voting system and explaining it, and the person I was on with from Labour said, I made the mistake of explaining Dahont to someone. and I could just see their eyes glazing over, she said, and I was like, I would never.
I always
attempt
try and go
do
to the
that.
next level and be like, well, you could go with the Santa Legue divisor system. And then the modified Santa Legue is even more, and people are just like, you are some loser, man.
So it depends how you sort of frame tactical voting, because there's definitely, I think
And people want to vote tactically, right?
The sense I get is when people don't know who they vote for, they know who they're definitely not voting for, right? And so there is a kind of potential there for tactical voting. How you use it, I genuinely don't know, right? So the polls, if I use my seat as an example, right? I'll have one poll that says I'm back in, I'll have another poll that says I'm not, right? Usually tends to be me and the Greens pretty much trading places. Right, Greens have improved slightly, so perhaps a second Plaid seat. So if you're a British sort of reform,
so that's in the 5th and 6th seat, just to say it like how it actually works. You're kind of fighting for those last.
If I'm fighting for seat 6, or I might get seat 7, I'm usually trading places with the second Plaid seat, right? Hypothetically. So if you're someone who believes in the UK and wants to stop independence and all the rest of it, it's actually quite a potent argument to make, right? How you explain, actually, there's 6 seats and the 6th seat and and the projection says this and 12%.
If you divide the first one by 3,
all
of a sudden, like, wow.
So there's something in there, but I just haven't crystallized in my head how you actually explain that on a doorstep
either.
because it's really
I haven't
difficult
even
to do.
really understood how it's going to play, but and just to say, because you're right, there's few polls and they're actually showing like major deviations, and the system's incredibly sensitive to small deviations when it's fragmented this much. So like there is certainly a truth to say, don't try and vote tactically. Vote for the party that you want the most, and the system will sort of process it. I suppose people are like, but I don't want to vote for a party that doesn't get elected. Which or as you say, to let in, we let in that Tory by voting for the Lib Dems, for example. And a lot of the chat on the doorstep does revolve around this, and people are free to say what they want about it, because in the end nobody knows. Genuinely. I mean, you can, if you were talking about a super micro candidate, you can say they're probably not viable. But once you get 11, 12%. You're just in this kind
Yes,
of
you're-
region where it can come in or not.
You're always in the picture, and you don't know what that means. So a lot of the projections, like you literally, right? Listen, politicians will pretend they don't look at polls. We all look at polls,
Yeah, of
right?
course.
So I'm obsessed with it, and I'm happy to admit that. And you go on the different websites which show you the projections, and like they're just all calculated incredibly differently. So the same poll on a different projection fires you out completely different results.
Well, the best ones will give you like a range of simulations, and like the range is massive.
Yeah.
Of potential outcomes.
And but you're right, that kind of tactical thing is really interesting as well, because I've seen I know we can talk about election literature in a bit, but there was a Lib Dem leaflet that went out recently, which I don't know if you've seen. It said, the choice here in Goreab Tower is between us and reform.
Yeah,
And I thought,
that came through
you,
my door. Yeah.
you guys are on 5% in the polls.
Yeah.
I said, I don't know how.
That was the Lib Dem one. Yeah.
Yeah,
okay,
I don't know
I
how
mean, it's a vintage.
you can just it's
That's a
vintage
classic Lib Dem.
tactic.
Only that we can win here.
Yeah.
Here's a bar chart that's extraordinarily wrong.
Yeah.
Like, that's how they market themselves.
Yeah.
The Electoral Commission has been informed.
But most people don't follow politics, right?
No.
In that way, they don't check every poll, and
Yeah.
there's a propensity to.
If that's what you
believe it and
read,
stuff.
yeah, all you've heard is that Lib
Yeah.
Dem, but it's Lib Dem v Reform. It's,
Yeah.
I mean, it's cheeky, isn't
Yeah.
it?
Yeah.
You can't.
Yeah.
As we're on your pitch and we just mentioned the
Yeah.
hardware, so sorry, producer Grant. I've just had this through my door like yesterday. Do you recognize this fella?
Other parties are available. This is not advertising.
No, so one party system. I said that at the start.
It's not
because
100% blue
I
wave.
always I mean I have colleagues in Nottingham who study this like they write papers and things about it, and I'm always struck by like how much of a little art piece each of these things is, and how you're and essentially the way you've formatted this is very much on a like essentially this sort of strategic voting or non-strategic voting in a way.
Yeah.
To say, look, if you want this party, vote this party. And like if you vote Conservative, you're more likely to get a Conservative is the message, is the kind of quote that comes out at the front. And so that sort of suggests to me that you do see the persuasion here as to do with strategy. Would that be like, and obviously you've listed a series of policy things.
Yeah.
20 miles an hour makes it in. We're getting a so it's stuff that you were running on that does like ideologically, politically differentiate you, but you've gone with this message first. So I mean, I'm just inferring that would suggest to me that that's the priority in terms of communicating.
Well, it's twofold, right? So you're right. We communicated the priorities, the things that we stand for, and there are a number of leaflets, where it's much more policy based, or certainly for me, local issues, right? All the rest of it. That specifically, I agree with you, is much more about how you vote. And I think one of the things that we as Welsh Conservatives have always struggled with is the turnout in devolved elections or Senedd elections versus what we would get in a general election. And a lot of that is not necessarily people switching parties; it's just simply Conservatives not turning out. And I think up until now, the feeling has been, well, there's no point in a lot of constituencies. Labour are going to win anyway. The national outcome is decided. I think in this election, where Labour on their backside and it's who replaces them is the kind of key question. But also because of the change in the voting system, I think explaining to people, actually, there is a reason for you to vote Conservative, even in a seat where we might not win on a first past the post basis. You will still get Conservative representation if you are a naturally Conservative voter and want, and want us to succeed as a party. Is a really potent message. But I think you're right, it's how that point gets across is the bit that's not clear. And the more stories there are, the more people's understanding is aided, going back to what we said earlier, by the fact that yes, it's a different voting system, yes, the result is in question. That will probably drive up turnout quite a lot as well.
Yeah, it's generally how the close elections drive up turnout.
Yeah.
So shall we start with turnout? On
Yeah,
Horse Race
we-
Politics?
let's go
It's a
to our
natural segue.
let's go to our markets. Yeah.
Horseracepolitics.com for the people at home. Free to play. We've got, goodness me, 22 days until the election. Jeez.
I can't wait till it's over.
I can't wait till it's over as long as we win. If we don't, I want it to go on.
The first race we have here is whether turnout will reach or exceed 50% or not. For the uninitiated, this has never happened in a Senedd election, 50% plus turnout. I believe when we
Got up
talked
towards 47%,
47% in the last one.
Never over 50, yeah.
So our general sentiment is 61% chance yes, 39% no. Would you reinforce that? Would you
So-
be bolder or?
So as a declaration of interest, I've signed up in the past week and I've been playing around. And this one I think yes, but I wasn't overly confident on yes. So I get the sense, as we were saying, right? Close election drives up turnout. I still think there is a general sort of lag and disinterest in Welsh politics in the same way. I probably think it will be above 50%. I don't think it'll be that much above 50%.
I think there's a tendency, certainly a tendency on my part to like, but I think it's any human cognition. Like whatever you're experiencing, you kind of generalize to everybody else. And you're like, oh my God, it's Welsh politics is everywhere at the moment. Whereas if you've never followed it, is there enough to hook you in? Yeah. It's a good question.
Yeah, I think the interest will be around the result and the outcome, right? Labour, it is not a foregone conclusion, and Labour not being the largest party after the election seems likely, and therefore should drive up turnout. I suspect a little bit.
Would you think that the general malaise of people might be countered by anger? People wanting to boot Labour out. I'm again. Sorry to bring back bad memories, but the anger of the kind of post-Liz Truss, Rishi Sunak, Boris Johnson administration.
So I remember knocking doors in the 2024 general election, right? And in terms of us, there probably was the anger, and that is not there now, right, on the doorsteps. For us, I'm not saying everything's perfect, but the kind of general, we want shot of you isn't there.
It's moved on to
it's moved on to Labour. The thing I'm finding most interesting from doorsteps is the kind of naturally Labour voters, people who voted Labour in 2024. Kind of saying, well, I don't really know what to do now. Yeah. And it's where they go, whether they turn out at all because they haven't settled on who they might vote for instead. That's the kind of thing that could drive down turnout if the kind of 2024 Labour voters who haven't really been convinced by anybody else don't turn out at all. That could be a big thing that knocks turnout down.
Yeah, and also if the 2024, like let's say the 2021 Labour campaign team that drove all those people out is probably pretty depleted as well, so the kind of effect of like people turn out, but they're persuaded to turn out across a campaign.
Yeah, and it's little things, but like how you motivate volunteers to come out and help. So I've noticed just in the however many years I've been involved in the Conservative Party, the elections where people think you're winning is not only better on the doorstep reaction, obviously, but you actually get far more people willing to give up their time to help make it happen. 2024, when you're trudging around the streets trying to cling on to what you've got, is really tough trying to get people to give up their time to do that. It's really difficult.
Largest party?
Wait.
No,
I just wanted to say on turnout. Will Hayward indoctrinated us into the school of this is going to happen.
Can you tell when I talked to Will Hayward? It was this bit. We had a BBC Wales reporter come by the office, so when I was showing him horse race, I was showing him updating a prediction, and then so I dropped it down to like 60-40, and then as soon as he left, I was like, put it back. I need my points. So yeah, I kind of full sent it to 100%. I think he raised the argument that we were at 47% last time, and that was a COVID election. Which
and just that general context you've discussed of like as COVID and 20 MP8 as like stuff that has probably drawn in people into thinking, okay, like the Senedd is actually doing stuff that I do or don't like. Generally don't like. Right.
Yeah.
But that's still a way in. Yeah. All right.
Now largest party.
Yes.
Just a general overview. I mean, we kind of got a general vibe of it from the conversation so far, but we're up to 68% chance of Plaid being largest party, 23% Reform, 6% Welsh Labour, 4% chance for Tie/other. So down in that little 4%, Tom Giffard, super majority.
Yeah, I don't know, you couldn't vote for us specifically.
Is on.
So this is really interesting, and this is one I genuinely don't know, because certainly, I spend pretty much all my time now in this seat, and it is not Plaid's strongest seat, by any stretch. I am seeing very, very little Plaid on the doorsteps. Not to say that's not happening nationally, but here it's not really happening at all. So I would suggest that Plaid's vote is very geographically concentrated in a way that probably Reform and Labour, and to a lesser extent us, is probably not in the same way. So again, it's just one of the quirks of the system. Plaid may get the most votes.
But that could help them, right?
Yeah.
But like, is that what I was thinking about, just to say about this distribution. You're totally right in terms of the uneven distribution of Plaid. But I'm like, in some cases that can swing the system in their favour.
Yes.
Right? So they can pop a kind of little like disproportionality bonus.
Yeah.
And in other cases, they can kind of have like these little half quotas that are going nowhere. And I'm like, so I'd initially been more conservative about Plaid, like in terms of, oh, that distribution doesn't look good. But then I thought that could be great.
Yeah.
And I'm like, God, I hate this system.
Yeah. I mean, you could end up with Plaid winning, say, 4 seats in Gwynedd Maldwyn, hypothetically, and then 1 seat here.
And
right?
but that 4 seats could be on I don't know, 60%.
Yes.
Rather than like 80%, which would be the proportional.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry to go into the maths of it, but
Yeah.
because I was thinking, generally that over concentration is bad.
Yes.
In first past the post, but it's very uncertain.
Yeah. So I genuinely don't know. I think that there is a strong argument to make that they may end up with the most votes. Whether that translates to seats is going to be a quirk of the system, I guess.
Yeah, and also this is separate to government formation. This is just pure seat count. This could be 30 if the election went wild.
I think what I've firmed up. So thank you, and I think what I've firmed up on a little bit, and you can see there's been a slight kind of shift in our market, kind of going away from reform a little bit and towards Plaid.
Kind of around the beginning of the month.
It's more can reform catch up to what Plaid is plausibly going to get, I think. Reform UK has seen this kind of sustained like tailing off nationally now. We just don't have enough Welsh polling to really discern that kind of trend at that level. But we've been talking about this idea of a kind of reform ceiling. As a sort of already persuaded people who are likely to vote for reform, but like the rest of the population remains less persuaded.
Yeah.
And also their challenge of turnout. And like a lot of the people, like when Francesca was in here for the lead candidate for reform, she's talking about knocking on doors where people don't normally vote.
Yeah.
Problem is those people don't normally vote.
Yeah.
It's like the Jeremy Corbyn youth strategy back in like 2019, 2017. Like if you target people who don't vote very much, that's not always the best way to go.
Yeah.
So I guess with those things, and just with the last kind of informing factor being like the connection between Nigel Farage and Donald Trump.
Yeah.
As
this
it
comes through.
You
a
know,
lot.
Donald Trump, Nigel Farage, Viktor Orban, like they've taken a few hits like during the last period. A lot of people who are like reform adjacent are quite religious and like tend to dislike sacrilege as a campaign message.
Yeah.
I mean, you haven't put any sacrilege on your. I mean, I can
Tom
confirm
Giffard
that.
looking like Jesus. In the,
So all of those things together just make me, I think there's a lot of variation in how each party can perform, but I just see more worlds where Plaid beat reform, and that's kind of starting to firm up in my mind.
I think you're probably right. I think the interesting thing with reform as well is the cut through of like certain things with them. So you might have seen there was a story in Wales. One of their candidates, had to resign because he was caught doing a Nazi salute, and it shocks me.
I did see that.
Yes, and it shocks me the number of like doorsteps of people like organically are bringing that up, and it's not often that kind of Welsh politics, particularly a story about a candidate, kind of has cut through.
But it's the picture.
Yes,
You never underestimate the picture.
Yeah.
Like the Prince Andrew picture.
Yeah.
And like, but like when it's one thing reading a text, somebody did something, they were involved in something that wasn't good. It's another thing seeing a picture of them giving a Nazi salute.
Yeah.
It does feel a bit kind of, we talked before about the attention that this election is getting. It does feel massively driven by reform rather than a kind of genuine interest in Wales.
Yeah.
And the idea that I've put this to a few people, the idea that reform are just really, are they just using Wales as a soapbox and, a stepping stone to a general Westminster election? And would they really just prefer to come second so that they can continue yelling without actually having any of the responsibilities? That kind of feels like the general vibe that I'm picking up from them, and then which is just then reinforced by, you're bringing some of the strangest people out of the woodworks now on candidate selection. Like we talked about it. Matt and I had this conversation 6 months ago that eventually they will have to name a few hundred people at some point for like councillors for a local election, and they're going to pull out some terrible names.
We've seen this with every Farage project.
Yeah,
like because they're all sort of what we'd call like a business party in like the kind of political parties literature. So like it's literally a business. It's so there isn't a sort of an organic draw up for them. Like and to be fair to the Conservatives, like they have a kind of embedding in like the community and like a history over time.
Yeah.
To where it's not as random a process pulling together the list.
Yeah, look, every party's had difficulties and struggles. I think there's something, you're right, disproportionately bad about reform. I think they lost 6, I want to say, candidates in their first week after they announced them. The fact they held off for so long because apparently the vetting process was really rigorous, and then turned out that there were literal candidates doing Nazi salutes.
Can I just say, right? So I was in the BBC there, and I was asking, like, so what actually happens if, like, let's say you have a 6-member list, and like 5 of the members drop off, and you win 2 seats. Apparently, there's just like an empty seat at the
vacant,
Senedd.
yeah.
And I was just like, you're going to have a literal like empty chair that your system is. I like, when you're like, is this? Am I about to wake up?
Yeah.
Type moments. We're not there yet with reform, which will be said, right? But I was like, I'd assumed there was some kind of alternative.
Well, maybe they'll resume cold calling Guardian journalists like they did the other week to try and get people to sign up. That is just.
But I think the bottom line is, like, when I will say this, when I was knocking doors 6-9 months ago, really felt stronger for them than it does now. And I think they then would have been much more bullish on being top of that chart than they probably do
this
now.
This global context shift it's bad for them, like because their leaders align with Trump, or at least it's seen to be, right? I mean, just to be clear, it's not allegedly, whatever. It's not like they work for each other, but also because, going back to your stability experience versus change, that kind of, I've noticed with all the parties, really, there's been an emphasis on a sort of with all the kind of normal mainstream parties that are long established, about credibility. And I thought initially, that's a difficult message because we are where we are. But like when you're literally looking at a global crisis, there is some value in someone who actually knows how much like overhang there is in the budget to attribute to capital projects on day one, and doesn't have to learn that over the first 3 months.
And I think what's interesting is probably a lot of the reform support, and I think if you had a Labour politician in the seat, they'd say the same thing about the Greens, is there is not necessarily people saying they're voting for reform because they have a specific policy in mind. It is usually just because, tear the whole system up, I don't trust any politicians, blah, blah, blah. And it feels like these sort of populist parties on the left and the right are kind of held to a different standard as traditional parties would be, right? There's an expectation on us to have fully fledged policy positions on a whole range of topics, whereas kind of Greens and Reform are a bit more vibes.
Yeah.
Although the IFS have had their way with everyone, right?
No,
to be
have.
fair, I was like, God, I'm glad I didn't put out a manifesto. But I think people can identify specific policy failures or things they'd like to see us do, and in fairness, the Labour Party do. Greens and Reform, or anybody voting for them because they like Reform's policy on something with the Senedd election? Probably not. So I think that is an interesting bit where, all right, the closer you get to an election and you actually look at the prospect of these parties actually being in government, you start to realise the kind of cupboard is bare in terms of an ability to stake out
I don't know if it's a feeling of like a prominence of kind of single issue voting, people picking the thing that matters the most to them and then just going for the party that mostly, as you say, best matches that vibe. The rest of it is okay. If you're really passionate about the environment, but there are a bunch of other policies that Polanski and the Greens have that you don't really agree with, you'd still vote for them because they're just, and the same with reform and immigration. It's I don't really mind the guys throwing Nazi salutes because they're going to be tough on immigration. Like, it's very much just pick the thing, pick the one thing.
Was the Nazi salute guy? He was Plaid, right? Just to be clear, wasn't it?
Nazi salute was
Reform.
Yeah.
Who was the Plaid guy who had to pull out? What was he after doing? I can't remember. There were so many of them.
They're all Nazis.
No, they weren't all Nazis. No, he'd said something very unpleasant on like Facebook or something.
Yeah,
Sorry, no, you're right.
Yeah, no, we're not accusing anybody of being a Nazi.
No,
just reporting what happened.
Picture speaks 1,000 words.
It's just like these characters in politics who are literally like one day like life cycle.
Yeah,
you're like, oh God, there was someone did that and they're off. And you're like, I don't really have to follow their subsequent career.
Yeah. Any other races? I've got the vote share up for reform.
Let's do that one.
So the strongest kind of sentiment is we have to get this right. A 55% chance that reform, or 55% confidence that reform will get between 26% and 40% of the vote. Next most likely outcome is somewhere between 0 and 25%. And then the least likely or least supported sentiment from our users is 41% or more.
Yeah.
I mean, 41% or more is apocalyptic for basically everybody else at that
I
point.
doubt anybody will get that. I think on that one, I think there's a huge difference though between 26 and 40.
Yes,
where
it's very all encompassing.
just in terms of seats, and so I would argue you're probably looking at the upper end of that 6 months ago, and you're probably looking at the lower end of that today.
Yeah, it does feel like that. Like when we introduced that cut point, so it's difficult to set a market actually. But we sort of thought, what would be a bad day for the party? And when we set it a bad day, anything under 25%, right? And like that has again just crept a little bit up as a kind of an outcome.
Yeah.
But it does seem like what par would be is sort of 25 to 30, and anything above 30 is into sort of happiness. Anything above 40 is like the whole game has changed.
Yeah, and we also had to standardize these races across all of the three parties that we gave it for. So Plaid, obviously, at the same time, were polling extraordinarily well. So we had to try and find these kind of cut points between outcomes that would kind of equally capture this sentiment of like a good or a bad day or an okay day. Obviously, we then applied this to Labour as well. that is a bit disproportionate in terms of what they're expecting. I can't remember what... Or is it Welsh Labour?
I think they're pretty firmly in this.
82% chance, or 82% confidence that they'll get between 0 and 25% of the vote.
Yeah, I mean, with Labour, I think you're more likely to see probably more what happened to us in the general election, which is Labour voters probably not turning out rather than them going elsewhere.
Yeah, and then I have been stung a few times. Maybe just the period I've been living in Wales. This kind of recurring cycle of like Labour are about to get smashed. Oh, Labour have actually done better than expected. And like, do those people, disaffected as they might be, they get to the ballot box, they're used to voting, and they just say, I have to give it to Labour. I'm a Labour person. You know, and I always feel like that there's a kind of little boost in Labour that I try and factor in. But 25% plus, they would be over the moon. And the whole narrative of the campaign would have turned out to have been wrong, really.
Yeah.
Or misconstrued.
Yeah, and again, it's really difficult, right? Because 25% is on a kind of if every seat in Wales was the same, right? 25% probably gets you 2 seats everywhere. 23% probably only gets you 1 seat everywhere. So you can see how this system is mad, basically. Where
and maybe the way to think about it is like whatever the party gets, divide it by 2, right? And then like, is that enough to get them a second seat? And that's exactly what you're just applying there. Like, and it all comes down to that kind of that cut point of about 12.5%, 13%. That's just kind of mathematically built in. Like getting right up to that and not there, that's a wasted vote in this system. Like an efficient vote is getting, like you said, like say 26%, 2 seats everywhere. But like that's all like it's impossible to forecast with that granularity. Like nobody can do it, and I don't care how many MRPs you run, how big your sample is. It's just it's like statistically impossible without sort of putting microchips in everyone's brain and knowing what they're going to do to forecast that differential, that kind of differential.
I think the interesting thing as well is it's just looking at it from a political party perspective, is it's forced us to kind of up our game in areas where we probably wouldn't have had to have campaigned as intensely in the past. And that is a good thing broadly, I think, for democracy, is that all parties now consider every seat to be competitive in one way or another. You know, for us, there's stuff happening in the 16th seat out of 16 for us that would never have happened on a scale before that. And I think that's definitely a good thing, and I think other parties will probably think the same.
Yeah, agreed. There's no safe seats in that sense. Like it's because it's like, well, is it your second or your third seat you're talking about being safe or not? And like, you know, again, if you imagine that the system was maybe, let's say 6 constituencies, each with 16 seats, then that threshold would be lower, right? Just to say, but like it's set where it's set. And the way that the fragmentation is, it literally generates nearly like a kind of kaleidoscope of opportunities where that one door that you knocked, that family or their friends that you got out can carry you over the margin. And I guess that's the mentality pretty much you guys have to take day in, day out, right?
Yeah. So there's 2 different conversations I guess you have with the doors, right? You're either having a conversation where you want to convince someone to vote Conservative because they're thinking of voting for somebody else, or you're having a conversation with someone who is committedly Conservative but is unsure about whether they like devolution or the Senedd or will vote at all. So the impact of those conversations actually is one is just as important as the other in a sense. It's not like a general election. We kind of assume most people who are going to vote will turn out anyway. There's actually a huge turnout game at play here. You know,
Yeah.
Speaking honestly, touch wood, I feel like there are enough Conservative votes in this seat for me to get over the line. Whether they turn out on the day is a different question, and that's the game for us, I guess.
And can I ask, do you have like a knocking up kind of strategy that you guys are starting to put together?
100%.
Yeah, knocking up is a kind of colloquialism.
Yeah.
That just means like on the day, who do you know?
Yeah.
And like how many of them can you, one way or another, like
Drive them
support
to
to get to the
But
encourage, you know.
But it's also about how you think about that. So, for example, if I know, because we get mock registers, we know who votes and who doesn't. If I know that this Conservative voter has voted 10 out of the last 10 elections, it's probably a waste of my time.
You don't
knock
need
their
to.
door,
Yeah.
Right?
They should be knocking you up.
Yeah. If this person next door's only voted 5 of the last 10, I definitely need to go and make a visit. And it's just about, you've only got a day on polling days, how you use that time most effectively. Because that's the type of thing that we'll be doing.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
And just last to say, you've only got the day, but then you can go to bed because like it's the next day that counts.
That's the worst bit. The idea I'm going to be able to sleep on that night.
Yeah, good luck with that.
Yeah, that's the whole system. The worst bit is count on the Friday.
Yeah.
I used to like sort of carrying through the adrenaline of like being up all night and
I want to see those people sprinting in Sunderland. You
Yeah,
know, like
yeah.
we have to be the first ones to be
But
counted.
I
And
was
they're killing each other.
also told that apparently only the winners are going to be on the podium.
Yeah.
And so like no bin face.
Oh,
You know what I mean? No.
Think of it this
I think
way,
it's good to have
make
everyone
a
there.
slightly serious point. Like if Elena Morgan does lose her seat, the idea that she wouldn't be able to speak at the count to sort of reflect on that seems weird.
I want to see how they try and stop her. You know,
Yeah,
she wants to get on the
exactly,
stage.
And I think just to say to everyone involved, because I've ended up meeting loads of people involved in electoral administration, just the way that the reforms have come through, the time that they've actually had to put all this together has been like they've been working to like a crazy deadline for about a year and a half now.
Yeah.
Of like, so we did have, these kind of materials like that tell us
Upside
how
down.
to vote. Upside down, fantastic. Yeah, there we go. Well, if you can read it in Welsh, you can read it upside down. But like producing all that stuff, trying to get those messages out, trying to be like getting the stage management of the account.
Yeah.
It all feels to me like it's been done in a slightly less like reflective way, and that's no stain on anyone. It's just like the speed that we've been doing this at as a country has actually been pretty dramatic.
Yeah, and there's a lot of recognition that lots of this is imperfect. So as I said earlier, about kind of returning to the boundaries and the next Senedd, whether they'll actually go through or not is a different question. But there's a kind of acceptance that even these boundaries are not ideal that we're fighting this election on. But
and the
they're
electoral
kind of-
system's going to be up for a chat again. And,
and this is kind of the system that we could get through in the time that we've got, and it'll do. Because it gets us more.
It
Senedd
does,
members
and
at the end
I do keep coming back to because like we're often quite critical of the electoral system, and obviously that's a political point, but it's one I feel political scientists can contribute some value to.
Yeah.
The system is totally fair. It's fair. It counts the votes fairly. It's not biased. The actual like conduct of elections in Wales is a very high integrity generally. We tend to see very low contestation of actual results or counts. So we might have recounts, which is legitimate and valid. It's just to say if you're thinking about not voting because you think the whole thing is rigged, you're an idiot. Like you don't understand what's happening.
Completely.
It's not rigged. Vote.
completely.
Yeah. That's my message to the people of Wales.
Yeah,
pretty
very,
much
very
from
optimistic
now on.
message. Yeah.
Vote.
Yeah.
Vote. It's fair. They count the votes.
And you almost certainly live in a seat where that vote will make a difference because every sixth seat is going to be.
And you don't really have a right to complain if you don't
exactly.
vote as well. I think that's the key thing.
Yeah, you can't be so boring in the pub, right? You can't even say that I voted. Yeah.
Jeez.
I voted for the Conservatives and I
got that letter.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
vote
yeah.
Conservative, you're more
Waiting on
likely
my
to get
tax cut.
Finishing off with Great Crack and Sad Sack for the
Oh.
week. Do you want to go first?
Yeah.
Who's had a good week?
Good week is Peter Magyar. So we have a new
Magyar.
Magyar. Yeah, I googled how to pronounce it and I immediately forgot, so I butchered it, no doubt. But an overturning of the Orban regime in Hungary again. Elections and again that's in elections in a much more constrained and difficult system, kind of producing turnover of power. You always ask, well, what's next? So we'll see. It's always nice when people are like celebrating in the streets, and then you're like, oh yeah, the budget, yeah, the economy. Sad sack, the secular global political order.
Okay.
So like a kind of a sub theme here. Like obviously the election itself is in this global context, and we've been talking about increases in petrol and diesel prices as kind of just factoring into this election, whether that make people more cautious and kind of look towards experience more, whether that'll make people more demoralized and turn away more. But what freaks everyone out is when the president of America AI generates an image of himself as Jesus Christ with a demon and like coming out of the sun.
Yeah.
And you're like, honestly, like this is messed up, you know, and your kind of assumption about the way that interests inform like policies and behaviors does depend on like sanity as a sort of a necessary condition for making sense of the world. And this is not the post of a sane man. And the rhetoric about, well, this is just me as a doctor. I mean, if we get this in the NHS, like we could really improve waiting times, because like he's just healing him by touching him with his hand. So this is kind of ludicrous, but this, as far as I can tell, really happened.
Yeah.
And so it's not just what's happening, it's who's in charge that I think is the sad sack of the week. And the idea that it was based on a sort of, you know, more or less rational calculation of interests struggles to deal with this kind of imagery.
It is quite bewildering. The guy in the hospital bed definitely doesn't look like Jeffrey Epstein either. Definitely just going to...
No, absolutely not.
Definitely not. Allegedly. I have gone for Roy McIlroy as my great crack. Some Irish representation.
He always takes you through the ringer, though.
It was a stressful affair watching the Masters over the last few days, but a great tournament nonetheless. Sad sack. I've gone for the Pope, because the Pope has been accused of being soft on crime, which, you know, that's not the reason I voted for the Pope. Okay? I thought he would be very stamped down.
He's going to cut my taxes.
He's going to cut my taxes. I got a letter through the door from Pope Leo. Yeah. And then JD Vance criticised the Pope and said that he should be careful when speaking about theology. Sorry, which I think is quite, of all the things that you could say to the Pope, I think telling him to be careful about speaking on theology is quite a choice selection. I did have Trump in there as the AI Jesus artwork, or sorry, AI doctor.
But just on a horse race politics note, I mean, this is called alienating your base. I mean,
massively.
You're testing the proposition of walking down Fifth Avenue and shooting someone. I think you could get away with that easier than like pretending to be Jesus to religious people, which like I can understand is extremely offensive if you're religious. I mean,
he already has a big chunk of that base like locked in. Like these hardcore evangelical voters, like they're not gonna be going, oh, should I vote for Trump or should I vote for Biden or whatever.
But picking a fight with the Pope, like obviously that's a Catholic base. But this,
Catholic, sorry, yeah, Catholic.
But you know, most of his base is in a sort of Protestant like denomination. But nonetheless, like attacking religious beliefs.
Yeah.
It's like you're saying the quiet part out loud.
Yeah.
Like keep those people with you. Just don't take the piss out of the thing that they actually believe in.
Yeah, false idols and whatnot.
I think mine are sort of linked to this, and I'd say probably JD Vance is a very bad week as a consequence of this.
He was sent out to be knocked down, wasn't
Yes,
he?
exactly, yeah. And you know, the kind of message that, oh, you know, this from Trump, right? This war in Iran is nearly at an end, only to discover that he's kind of sent out there to negotiate, fails to negotiate any kind of peace settlement. Now we're in multiple blockades and Strait of Hormuz. And look, this stuff really hits people when it hits the average American in the pocket, and it does seem to be doing that in a big way. So the benefactor would probably be someone like Gavin Newsom, who looks, to be fair, more and more like a kind of credible...
He's kind of consolidating, isn't he?
Yeah,
over time.
Alternative to the kind of chaos that we're seeing in the White House at the moment. And I guess there'll come an inflection point if that sort of stuff carries on.
Yeah.
You know, Vance is seen as incredibly close to Trump, as is Rubio and some of the other contenders. At what point did they kind of divorce themselves from Trump potentially? If he's seen to be a bit of an alpha in the neck, and then in turn, how does he react?
And then we're into the midterms as that's all unfolding. And do they happen? Are we in a state of emergency where we can't have elections? I mean, it does not look like Trump's on a good trajectory into the midterms, and the last few weeks hasn't helped that.
This doesn't help.
This doesn't help anything, to be fair. No.
I'm trying to like get a good understanding of like everything that's in there. We have people praying. We have the American flag. We've got a few bald eagles, some fighter jets.
That's an angel rather than a demon. Sorry, yeah.
But you know, like fighter jets and Jesus go hand in hand as like this kind of conjoined imagery.
There's one thing I would say about Wales generally is
Ellen Ed Morgan isn't doing this.
Yeah, I was
shit.
gonna say.
like
Yes,
like
there's
the
3 weeks to go.
Could hardly get any worse. Let's just start doing shit
I
like
mean,
this.
there are people who can tell you about chemtrails and stuff like
Yeah,
that that you meet around the place. But I think we can commend ourselves that like bullet points of policy priorities is
Yeah.
more what I like to see from my politicians.
Yeah.
Good. And, if you vote Conservative, you're more likely to get Conservative. That's the message.
There you go.
That's
Hit
what
the
I heard
line.
anyway. Yeah.
Speaking the line right there. Tom, thank you very much.
Thank
for
you
being
so
on
much.
the
Thank you
show.
so much.
It's
I
been a
enjoyed it.
pleasure having you.
Thank you.
Best of luck in the elections and au revoir.
Ciao.